We have talked about what slope is, change in y over change in x, and how to find it using a graph. We are going to talk about how to find slope using the slope formula. You are going to watch, you are going to listen, and you are going to take notes in your booklet on page 6. Let's start by taking a look at what the formula says. Given any 2 points on a line, x sub 1 and y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2, you can find the slope of the line, which we represent with a lowercase m, using the formula m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I just read to you what this says, and I want to point out where the formula comes from. In the numerator is your change in y. The same way that we did change in y using our graphs. And in your denominator is your change in x. The difference in the y over the difference in the x. Remember, that's what subtraction is difference. Now, we want to make a note here. The 1 and the 2 are subscripts, so they're small and they're lowered. And they tell us from the first point and from the second point. So these ones here and here, tell us the x coordinate from the first point, the y coordinate from the first point. And then the 2's here tell us the x coordinate from the second point, the y coordinate from the second point. So our formula here tells us to do y2 minus y1, that's our numerator, over x2 minus x1, that's our denominator. And again, all we're doing is the difference in the y over the difference in the x, which is the same definition for slope that we were using the last couple of days. So let's look at some examples. We have 4 examples. They're all set up the same. We're given that a line goes through 2 points, and we're asked to find the slope. I'm going to start by labeling underneath each point x1, y1, and x2, y2. So x1 is 2, y1 is 2. x2 is negative 1, y2 is 6. My slope formula says y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Let me try that again. Okay, so my slope here, 6 minus 2, that's my y sub 2 minus my y sub 1, over negative 1 minus 2. Now I do my arithmetic. 6 minus 2 is 4. Negative 1 over negative 1 minus 2. Signs are the same, so I add and keep the sign. We are going to leave our answer as a negative 4/3. Do not change it to a decimal. We want our slope to be a fraction. So my slope here is negative 4 over 3, or 4 over negative 3. Now, some people like to rewrite. Let's go look at example 2. Some people like to rewrite their points stacked on top of each other. I actually learned this trick from one of my students because it helps them to set up for their y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'll show you what I mean. When I do y2 minus y1, I'm going to do negative 1 minus 3. And when I do x2 minus x1, I'm going to do 2 minus 0. The order is important. This is your x1, y1. This is your x2, y2. Doing my arithmetic here, I get negative 4 over 2, and I can reduce that one to just negative 2. So the line that goes through the point 0, 3, and 2, negative 1 has a slope of negative 2. The formula just tells us to take out certain values and plug in the given value. So I'm taking out in example 2 here, I'm taking out x sub 1, plugging in 0. I'm taking out y sub 1, plugging in 3. I'm taking out x sub 2, plugging in 2, and y sub 2, plugging in negative 1. Let's look at our last two examples. I'm going to do the stacking again. Whoops. Let's try that again. So I'm going to do negative 3 comma 3. That's my x sub 1, y sub 1. And 2 comma 3. That's my x sub 2, y sub 2. When I do my slope formula, you have to memorize this, so you might as well write it every time. That way you won't mess up. I'm going to do 3 minus 3 over 2 minus a negative 3. So I'm going to get 0 over, remember minus a negative is the same as plus a positive, so that is going to be 5. Now 0 over 5, 0 divided by 5 is 0. So this has a slope of 0. Our final example. Again, I'm going to stack my points. x1, y1 is negative 1, 3. x2, y2 is negative 1, negative 1. And again, I'm writing my slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to get negative 1 minus 3 over negative 1 minus a negative 1. In my numerator, the signs are the same, so I add and keep the sign. In my denominator, change my minus a negative to plus a positive. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And that right there is a big no. You cannot divide by 0, ever. So my answer here is undefined. My slope in this case is undefined because you cannot have 0 in your denominator. You can't divide by 0. We'll talk more about why that is in class, why we can't have 0 in the denominator, but it's a very important thing for us to remember. Remember what's really happening in these last two examples. This graph, if I were to plot the points real quick, if I were to plot the points real quick, negative 3 comma 3, 2 comma 3, this graph's a horizontal line, which is why my slope is 0. If I were to plot these points real quick, negative 1 comma 3, and negative 1 comma negative 1, this one's going to be a vertical line, which is why the slope is undefined. So in these four examples, we do have a positive slope, a negative slope. We actually started with our negative slope. Oh, we actually have two negatives, a 0 slope and an undefined. I didn't do an example with a positive slope. That's okay. We'll do more examples with positive slopes later. All right, that is finding the slope using 2 points on the graph without having to actually plot the points in order to count.